Very good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start the discussion with Mr. Ratnam. Well, Chhattisgarh is a state which has shown remarkable improvement in distribution sector reform. CSPDCL has also signed the MOU under Uday scheme for operational and financial turnaround of the CSPDCL. What benchmarks has been set by the state to achieve sustainable financial and operational efficiency of the DISCOM?
We have to achieve the AT&C losses targets by the stipulated period, that is the March 2018. As you know, the DISCOM is the last link and the most important link which gives an access to the consumer to use the electricity. The challenge before us in India is not to have a profit out of this business, but to sustain it in an affordable manner so that the energy, which is the prime mover of every activity of our life, including the industrialization, sustains the competition of economy. Now this Uday has come with more stringent riders. One of them is to achieve a AT&C target of 15% within a very short period of 3 to 4 years right from now on. As all of my friends and senior operators of the DISCOMs know, that AT&C losses is a very bad target for all of them because it demands huge infusion of funds to make my wire matching with the capacity, matching with the last and connectivity. DISCOM's finances are in a very shabby position and no financial institutes dare to venture into advancing the loan to us without any government support. So this Uday talks about a support from the government where the balance sheet of the DISCOM was improved by wiping out the debt. Now we are starting with a very clean slate, that all the previous debts have been taken over by the government and its repayment responsibility is with the government. So now DISCOM has to demonstrate with their efficient functioning, bringing down the AT&C losses to the targeted levels. What it means to a common man when we reduce the AT&C is that more availability of electricity from within the procured basket. So we need not put any further money for additional power, and this additional power can be sold to the consumer for realizing our ARR requirements. The challenge before the DISCOM who has signed the Uday is to how to meet those AT&C losses targets, number one. Number two, second target is don't leave any gap between the ARR, what you anticipate and what you get from the regulator. Again, the irony is that DISCOM has to file an ARR before the regulator, and regulator has to approve the ARR to come out of the average cost of supply, which determines the consumer tariff across the users. Until and unless the regulator makes the ARR approved, the DISCOM cannot have a consumer tariff. Uday talks about not to leave any gap between the ARR approved and ARR put in the petition. So this is a challenge before the DISCOM to convince the regulator that I am achieving my milestones as per the target signed in the Uday for a trajectory period of 3 to 4 years. So you have to approve my ARR as it is. If it happens, I am sure that all the signatories of the Uday scheme will achieve the transformation and the financial dependability.
I'd like to ask Dr. Singh, Mr. Dhonde and other panelists that Mr. Ratnam talked about some of the challenges. And as we know that Uday scheme could be the fulcrum of the power sector reform. So what are the other challenges and how could those be addressed?
See, the main issue is in Uday, main challenge is the reduction of the loss. And as sir pointed out, the challenge of distribution sector is the geographical spread of the business. So it's like generation or transmission company, they don't have limited input points and measuring points. So here the challenge is the consumers are spread across the state, and the input units, the quality of supply, poor quality of supply. Finally, whatever we are giving this energy to them, we have to make it realized through their metering system. So for that matter, we have to strengthen the system as well. So there are two parts. One is the network related challenges, and second is the operational challenges, which is billing and collection. So as under this scheme, the target which has been set, which is of around 15%, and as far as Chhattisgarh is concerned, the existing loss level is 20.50, 20 odd percent. In my point of view, see, as sir had pointed out in the beginning, the 50% sale is almost 45% sale is of HT consumers. Assuming that there is no loss in HT network, assuming out of 100 units, 45 units are sold to HT consumers with minimum loss. So out of that 40 remaining 55 units, 20 units is a loss. If you segregate this loss between HT and LT, so 20 units lost over the 55. So it is one out of every 2 or 3 units is being lost. So the real challenge is that how to measure that. So if you segregate this, you will identify the problem, you will segregate the problem, and then you will attack the problem. Now, in this system, they have 100% feeders metered. They have DTCs, almost 63% DTCs metered. They have agriculture as well as all consumers metered. So that's the question. Then where is the problem? It appears that the problem is in the billing part. So whatever, because if everything is metered, then it should have been, the two ends should have been matched. So it appears that the problem is in billing part. So now in that case, then whole process will have to be studied and pointed out what changes will have to be done. But the primary, as I said, the LT segment which is there is the problem. As far as CapEx is concerned, this is about the operation part. The CapEx is concerned, yes, as sir pointed out, 41% of the geography is under forest. So 100% network is not reached. So they have set target of reaching that network out to each and every household. But the kind of investment going into this, because if you see the average per capita consumption for rural, 75% of these Chhattisgarh is on rural part and 25% in urban. So the kind of investment which is going in RGGY, IPDS and other schemes will have to be reviewed. Because for 400, see, first stage is to reach out to the consumers and the schemes which are for the Bastar or other schemes, solar schemes, it will have to be implemented. But wherever there is a, I would say the less consumption, the kind of investment which is going into the system will have to be reviewed, and so that which will ensure that the average cost of supply will not go up. So you will have to avoid that additional padding of the cost, unnecessary asset creation.
In fact, I'd also like to know that since Tata Power distribution company it's a privatized DISCOM, so what are your suggestions for government DISCOMs? Like as a private DISCOM, I think you've been quite successful in reducing the AT&C target without any support from the government initially.
In 2012, there was a FRP package, so the financial restructuring was done to reduce the burden. That moratorium period is ending in 2016-17, and the Uday scheme has come. That now again the DISCOM's burden is shifted to the state, and DISCOMs have been told that now financially you are relieved, you perform, bring your losses to 15%. If we see all these schemes, one by one, all schemes failed. Revised DRP, though it is presented in many of the form as a success, it virtually failed. None of the states, bearing few, and Chhattisgarh is one of those few. In fact, Chhattisgarh is a state where from we learned and we implemented billing application, the SAP billing application. Bearing one or two states, in all states, first part of revised APDRP failed. None of the state, the SCADA is actually operating the way it should operate. none of the state, the GIS is actually implemented and maintained. Part B portion in most of the states has not been implemented. And before the work has been completed and revised APDRP, government again announced IPDS and DDGY without going into the details why revised APDRP failed. And IPDS scheme again, they put the IT component. They said now you implement ERP and you can also consider the smart metering. I don't know what made government confident that after failing of IT part of revised APDRP, why they have not thought that what is the root cause of that failure. See, the problem is when we implement technologies, it requires complete change in the business processes. And in the revised APDRP, there was no mention that a utility has to appoint a consultant who will see the processes, the impact of these technologies, and will reorganize itself to implement those. Most of the states, the IT cell is not there, and they have taken crores and crores for IT implementation. Data center is basically a dump center in those states. Uday is giving you a financial relief, but it doesn't say what you have to do to reduce losses 15%. When you do restructuring in 2012, you said same thing. Tariff has to be cost reflective. It was done in first 1 or 2 years, then it was not done. Because the political interference is so much in this business that it doesn't run like a business. It runs like a charity show. And till the time this is running, I don't think the Uday relief is going to create any solution as such. When we took over Delhi, we took over all employees. All employees are performing and the loss level is 53%. To this year we have closed at 8.5%. Our CIO is the person who was in Delhi Electricity Board, and she implemented all technologies. Operational efficiency improvement, it requires strict monitoring, reorganization, and a deep sense of accountability.
Ultimately, the success or failure of the entire Uday scheme would rest on the operational performance. The Uday has two parts actually. There is the financial part and second is the operational part. Now the financial part is the low-hanging fruit, which is getting plucked. Everybody is picking that. So that gets implemented and it becomes successful also. And unlike the previous restructuring which happened, which was done more as central power utilities as focus, this restructuring has been done with banks as focus. So immediate relief to banks. But if you talk to banks, banks themselves are not very happy about it because they were used to charging very high interest rate. And now probably they will have to settle with much lower interest rate. But of course, more certainty on their recovery of the loan amount. Pardon me for saying that the state and distribution companies always have not worked hand in hand. If state has gone in one direction, the distribution companies have gone in another direction. And also it has so happened that the balance sheet of distribution companies has always been a matter of neglect. It has never been. And it's also very important to realize that a good balance sheet leads to a good balance sheet. And that is what you're trying to do now. That you're trying to, through state intervention, you're trying to have a good balance sheet for DISCOM. But this could have been done without this kind of intervention. If you had good balance sheet in place where DISCOMs got their cost, their ARRs were cost reflective, there was no need to have this kind of Uday scheme in place. But we didn't have that. It was always overlooked. This time the responsibility has been shifted from distribution company to more to the state government. Probably it puts much more accountability in the system from that angle. The operational part of it is the reduction of AT&C losses, cost reflective tariffs, end of cross subsidization. That's a difficult part. That is what needs to be carried out. And timely filing of ARRs. Now, many times we do blame the regulator, but many times the state power utilities themselves are not ready with their financial reporting. The operational reforms have to happen because unless the governance is improved, because Delhi is a model of governance. The governance was taken care of. So basically you had better accountability in system, better technology, better interventions. Delhi is one state where reforms happened, and for 5 years, why reforms were successful in Delhi? Because for 5 years there was no tariff hike. Now I'm not advocating no tariff hike, but the AT&C losses reduction were so high, they themselves took care of the tariff hike. So some kind of, so the efficiency was the model which made it sustainable. So ultimately the UDAY scheme, though it's a departure from past and it's different from what it has been done in past, ultimately the success of it would rest on the fact that the governance and operational issues are handled.
Mr. Banga, you talked about some of the things like why APDR failed and why they might also fail. So if we talk of the private versus public DISCOM, Tata Power Delhi Distribution brought significant improvement in financial and operational efficiency without any financial bailout. So does it show the functional difference between a private and a public DISCOM, or was it a strong will of the state government to bring reform in the state power sector? In Delhi, there was an absence of rural areas, while in other states there are rural areas also to be taken care of. So where generally policies are like that you will provide free power to agricultural areas, because generally it is provided either free of cost or at a very subsidized rate. So how could this be taken care of?
The problem with distribution company, a DISCOM, is it doesn't run like a business. Your tariff is not cost reflective. If you run it like a business with reasonable return and its leader is empowered, then there is no reason why it should not be a less loss-making company, a reasonable loss, 8% or 9%. The problem is there is a huge amount of political interference. There is no alignment between the leader and the down level. A DISCOM doesn't have any vision as such. So my only point is, whether it's a private or public, it's more a performance-based or non-performance-based.
That UDAY goes a good way towards the liquidity problem. But does it go far enough towards the solvency problem? And the fundamental question is, how prospective is UDAY? Meaning, what will be the challenges 1, 2, 4 years from now? So, we are still solving today's, if not yesterday's problems, instead of worrying about what we need to plan for 1, 2, 4 years from now. So, even in the lifespan within UDAY, you've got targets of 100% electrification, lower losses, higher RE. These are all things that are planned. And so the fundamental question is, are we setting ourselves up for the future that has to recognize disruption? And let me clarify what that really means. Because the power sector has been the similar thing for 100+ years. And the old grid, comparing it to future grid. Now I'm not using the term smart grid because the opposite is a dumb grid. No one's dumb. But in the old grid, supply and demand were matched by having sufficient supply. Obviously someone needs to pay for it. Demand is variable, so you always had excess supply. Now in the future grid, look at the targets of RE of Chhattisgarh, of many states. Your supply itself is variable. So how do you manage that? Either you have to again re-over-engineer, or in the future grid, you have to think about how can we also control demand dynamically. And this comes to the fundamental problem with the business model of DISCOMs. Like many regulated entities, you make more money the more product you sell. Now on the other side, we are saying, please be efficient and use less energy. So that means DISCOMs are fundamentally at a tension between selling more product and being viable when you sell less product. So that's a fundamental tension that requires a rethink of the business model. Because if consumers like to go to RE. This term you may have heard about, grid parity. People are saying solar is already grid parity. And now think 4 years later where solar prices will be. It is not as if these consumers exit the grid. They reduce their load in the day when the sun shines, but in the evening they still come back to the DISCOM. So your DISCOM is acting like a battery for these users. That business model has not been figured out anywhere in the world. And so these are some of the challenges which lead to what is called the utility death spiral. That's a term people use, saying more people exit, rest of the grid gets costlier. As the rest of the grid gets costlier, people will do more RE, more storage, more demand response, and more will exit, and it's a cycle. And it gets worse in India because we have so-called C&I consumers, or the larger residences whose tariff slab is much higher than their actual costs or the variable costs. Proposed amendments to Electricity Act, carriage and content separation. That is one of the fundamental bottlenecks that came up, that are you a provider of last resort? So okay, we'll worry about that in a transfer scheme. But we've already seen what happens with these things that are meant to be temporary or transparent. Look at cross-subsidy surcharges. In theory, they were meant to go away, have a time frame. Hasn't happened. So how do we manage this change? How do we stop using average numbers? Uday sets targets, all these schemes have targets. These schemes don't go towards a business-like way of running a DISCOM, which really says, look, this is where my pains are. People say, no, you're giving free power to people, that's your problem. A household consuming 30 units a month is not going to be bankrupting your DISCOM. Second myth, willingness to pay. I think that's another big myth, because people are already paying either for lack of power or for backup power, captive power, diesel, batteries. So there are costs already borne. Even the poorest of poor are spending on kerosene. You look at NSSO data, 88% of Indian households, rural, are using kerosene for primary or secondary lighting. How much does that cost them? 15 rupees a litre, 3 litres, 45 rupees a month, plus the subsidy or subvention at the taxpayer level or the non-payer level. 70 rupees a month for 80% of households. That's with today's low oil prices. It was higher, it was over 100. If you could actually give them lifeline power, maybe 50 units or 50 watts or 100 watts, in the evening peak lighting we're talking about, the cost of that electricity would have only been 3 rupees a month, roughly. But today we don't have that ability to distinguish. We have no ability to visualize what's happening, and we can't control. How do you stop somebody from using a coil, 100 rupee device that can use disproportional energy? Or in rural areas, induction cookers are now gaining popularity. I can foresee an election manifesto where before people talked of grinders or other things. Maybe it will be energy consuming devices. So these are the futures that we want to recognize and also enable people to consume to improve their quality of life. And this is my belief, and we have some data. If you give them quality, they will be willing to pay for it.
Friends from DISCOM will agree that 80 to 90% of the total value chain cost is actually power procurement cost for any DISCOM. So though we talked about 20% AT&C losses, somewhere we forgot to address this issue. When I say 80 to 90% is actually power procurement cost, let us go back slightly 5 to 7 years. The scenario was, everybody was keen to enter into long-term contracts. So people were running after PPAs. So they were securing contracts for next 25 years. So in the process, what happened? We know there are certain states, they have tied up excess capacity. Now what is happening? Suppose my peak requirement is 6,000 megawatt. Let's take example of Delhi. And we have entered into contract of over 8,000 or 9,000 megawatt. So we are loading our consumers with extra burden of carrying this capacity. So when they are carrying this capacity, and this is for next 25 years, we made certain assumptions, certain projections that load will grow, demand will grow in this fashion, which has actually not happened. So today, 7 years back, everybody was running for securing PPAs. Now people are running to surrender those PPAs. So we know what is happening in Delhi. There are old power plants, inefficient power plants. Daily there is a news article that Delhi government or DISCOMs, they want to surrender these contracts. Yesterday we had one single price for entire country in the exchange. This thing has happened almost 8-9 times in last 4-5 months. So 8 times it has happened that there is only one price for the country, and that price is 2.30 only. So of course we have to add all the losses and charges pertaining to your state, but this is happening. Why this has happened? Lot of lines also got commissioned. Supply which was restricted towards southern region, that has also improved. W3 was congestion region. Earlier people was unable to export power from there. This has also improved. Today we have capacity of over 20,000 megawatt available for merchant generator to export their power.
Price depends on the demand. Right now demand is very less, and that's why prices are very low. In fact, a lot of power is going unsold in the market. A lot of merchant power plants, they're selling power at a very, very low rate. A lot of such requirement comes up. Then obviously price will go up. Is there any mechanism to keep a check on the price?
As you rightly said, today we have a supply surplus scenario. In last 6-7 years, almost capacity has almost doubled. We have added about 1,50,000 megawatts, whereas demand growth is only 10 to 20, 30 megawatt has happened. Today, as against 3 lakh megawatt of installed capacity, peak demand met is only 1,50,000. So today's capacity available is double, and we can also project this for next 2, 3, 4 years. There are a lot of merchant power plants which are going to come in this and next financial year. And then we have so much renewable energy capacity which is going to be added. So we are talking about 1.5 lakh till 2022. So with this power coming in, we should be rest assured for at least next 3 to 4 years that this trend will continue. So if this trend will continue, rates will also continue in this fashion.
The lesson is really that not all kilowatt hours are the same. When it comes, is very important, and the problem wasn't PPA versus spot. In both of these there was no signaling that I need power at the peak period. So we need mechanisms that I should be willing to pay 5 rupees a unit, 6 rupees a unit to procure, if that's only for 1 hour a day or 10 hours in a month or something like that. That is when you've got maturity of the spot markets. I will second your point that these are not liquid equilibriums. We can't go by these prices because you will see ups and downs, including in high RE futures in the West, negative pricing. When you actually have surplus, we are not quite there yet. So we have to stop saying 68.5% PLF. That PLF, if it comes at the quote-unquote wrong time, is not of the same value to the DISCOM. So we need peaking power, which then will mean we want storage technologies or other things to come up, or gas, solving the gas pricing. Gas, people say that, look, we've got surplus capacity. All of the gas plants, I think except one, are combined cycle power plants. They are not peakers. So these are the things where we have to rethink how we do procurement. I second your observation that a big chunk goes to procurement, but to link from procurement, we have to come back to the DISCOM, which really says how much do I need when. Then we'll figure out a true base load, which could be the PPA mechanism. Then you've got the mid and the shoulders, and then you've got the true peakers. All of them will have different pricing and different quantums.
The power which is available with the exchange, it is of a speculative nature. And when you look at we are borrowing something from the Western, where the exchange has very comfortably placed and operating for so many decades of existence. When you come to the Indian scenario, our base load like concept is no more valid because my variation in the demand has lost any relationship with the base load. When there is a rain, my load reduces by more than 1200 megawatt. And when there is some stoppage of rain, my AC load increases and my peak touches the 4200 megawatt. It is right that there has to be a mix between the long-term and the short-term procurement. But here the role of the regulator starts. The regulator says that any outage has to be stamped by my approval. And regulators, known in their own wisdom, I don't think that they have permitted any of the DISCOM to go for an outage. Even if there is a strong request, you talked about the political interference. We have to live with the politics. Politics is not going to be segregated from us. DISCOMs, when they are in the regulatory regime, it is for the regulator to demonstrate that they are free. You can't blame the DISCOM for the politics. Regulators have to come out with an irony that they are regulating this sector in an independent manner. Political decisions will be there, political directives will be there, they will be taken as a challenge by the DISCOMs. But until unless the regulator permits for an outage, maybe a seasonal outage, we cannot rely on the exchange power to have an affordable pricing to the electricity, that too on the 7/24 basis. What happens if I have shut down my PPAs? Most of the DISCOMs have started doing that. The investment has gone into the generation based on those PPAs. How the money will flow back for surviving those investments? And if generator runs away from the scene, seeing that now there are more reliance on the speculative exchange rates, then how you will survive in the future? Surviving today is good with your speculative business, but for a 10 years perspective, for a 15 years perspective, you have to have a reliance on the PPAs. And for 10 to 15%, that is the spinning reserves which we are talking about. Spinning reserves is a long drawn forecast for this country.
Tomorrow there could be demand again, and then we have to address that. So what we can do is, going forward, we should adopt more cautious approach, wherein we should not only go for PPAs, we should explore all the things. I am not saying we should surrender.
We have built up so much of capacity in the country and there is no demand for it. So it's a situation which has come, and whether the situation is sustainable or not, that is to be seen, because whether it's it continues for 1 year or 1.5 years or 3 years maximum, that is what has to be seen. But we have built up capacity and then we don't have demand for that. Now PPAs are not happening, and your power plants are ready. We have 40,000 megawatt of standard capacity in the country, and for which the outflow of power has to happen. And next year, another 20,000 megawatt would get added, which are work in progress. So what happens to these power plants? They all go to exchange, bring down the exchange rate. So then, over a period of time, as on date, there is not a single investment coming in thermal sector in India. Not a single investment. All that is of past. So the cycle gets repeated. After 5 years, you don't have a thermal power plant added to the capacity. So you go back to the old days. So also what is very important is who are funding the investment. There are long-term lenders who have backed these projects on anticipation of PPAs. And they will not back projects on merchant power. They will never back. They have done it in past. They have burned their finger. They will not do it again. So, we can't really write off what we have been doing in past. Of course, it's always better to have a mix of both. Delhi case is a different case, because Delhi have 6,000 megawatt and they have 8,000 megawatt. Unfortunately, at that point of time, Delhi was trying to become like Singapore or Hong Kong. So they were saying that, we'll island ourselves and we'll have more capacity and we will, not depend on the grid. So it was ahead of the time thinking at that point of time, and they built up capacity. Now that surplus capacity is, creating the problem of, but one reason for that is that, the regulator is not giving the cost-reflective tariff. If the cost-reflective tariff was there, you pay for higher capacity. It doesn't matter. In Singapore, against the requirement of 8,000 megawatt, you have 16,000 megawatt. But then the kind of power supply you have, not a second you will find there is a power shutdown. So you pay for that kind of power, provided the regulator is ready to pass it on. Delhi people have that capacity to pay. Most of the people have that capacity. So one has to see that whatever model we adopt is a sustainable model.
No distribution utility can enter into a long-term agreement until or unless it projects the demand based on the CEA guidelines and get it approved from the regulator. All power purchase agreements are approved by regulator on the basis that this demand would be there. And it is always better that you should have a long-term agreement, because then you are away from the fluctuation of prices. It is always expected that the short-term prices will be more than the long-term prices, and that is why everyone enters in the long-term agreement. The problem in our system is, in last 4 or 5 years, the DISCOMs have gone financially in bad condition. Unfortunately, no regulator says, like the AT&C losses, your reliability target for the next year is this. DISCOMs are free to cut supply for empty hours, and there is no questioning on that. They can have a rotational load shedding, and they will even announce in newspaper that this area will get 18 hours of supply, this area will get 22 hours of supply. There is no roadmap from the regulator side that next year you have to supply 24 hours. 24 hours in urban or 24 hours in rural. The day regulator comes with those guidelines, your exchanges prices will always go more than the long-term price. And then actually the situation will improve.
So one of the panelists also talked about the gross subsidy issue. So one of the biggest causes for subsidy remains power supply to the agricultural sector. Agriculture paid an average of just rupees 1.49 per kilowatt in India compared to rupees 6.18 per kilowatt paid by the industry, and even higher tariffs of rupees 7.53 and 12.33 per kilowatt paid by the commercial and other sectors. So what could be the most economical way of subsidizing agriculture and other consumer categories?
So when DISCOMs or regulators say this is my cost of serve or cost of supply, they look at average numbers. So one of the things we've discussed is we have to stop looking at average numbers, look at marginal costs. So if agriculture is supplied in the off-peak, if the exchange rates are good or whatever, then those average numbers don't apply. And at the same time, all the loss numbers are made up. Not all, but a good chunk of them are made up. Before we could answer how to handle it, we have to step back and say, if I only look at power pricing, I will get one set of outcomes. But I need to look at food pricing, other subsidies, support prices. Until I look at all of these properly, I don't think we're going to get to a societally optimal outcome. Let me give you a specific set of numbers. If you look at the census, the SECC, half the farmers are laborers. They don't have land, they're laborers. Of the other half don't have a pump set. So it's your upper 25% of farmers who are the beneficiaries on an average national basis of this subsidy power. So question I ask is, are these support mechanisms efficient and appropriate, or what else could or should we be doing, instead of just saying, okay, let me try and figure out what's the minimum I need and who do I squeeze it from?
See, today cross subsidy in certain states are as high as 3 rupees 60 paisa per unit. Can you imagine? In West Bengal it is 3 rupees 60 paisa per unit. In Tamil Nadu it is 3 rupees 40 paisa per unit. And there are many states where it is more than 2.5 rupees. So this is the biggest hindrance towards open access. So Electricity Act talked about gradually reducing the cross subsidy. In fact, this is going in reverse direction. So as per new tariff policy, cross subsidy ceiling is 20% of the applicable tariff for that category. So with this, I think in certain states like AP and others, they are reducing it a bit. It was earlier 2.5 rupees, now they have brought it down to 1.4, 1.5 now. So this is some sort of relief to some of the states, but in some other states where it was 40, 50 paisa earlier, there also it has gone up to 1.5 rupees. So it is actually acting both ways for the open access consumer.
It's very important that distribution companies are insulated from subsidy, because distribution companies are not in the business of economic upliftment. They are in the business of supplying power. So they have to be freed from it, and it's for the government to give subsidy. There is no harm in giving subsidy. Countries across the world give subsidy. You can give subsidy as a part of the government's policy and program. But only thing is the distribution company should be fully hedged from subsidy. In fact, in case of Delhi, what has happened in recent days is that the government has been declaring subsidy and not passing it on to, so theoretically subsidy is available, but the cash is not available. As a result, they are not able to pay money to power suppliers.
Regarding the subsidy issue, it is not only the farmer which gets the subsidy. Every person who is sitting over here enjoys the subsidy in form or other. When you go to a petrol station for putting in a petrol in your vehicle, you enjoy the subsidy. When you are going to a railway station and having some cup of tea, you are enjoying the subsidy. Subsidy is not a dirty word. Subsidy, we have to live with it. Only thing is that it has to be a measured subsidy, so that we can know that very purpose of this subsidy and how it is going to support the society as a whole. Just now, my friend sitting on the left has said that only 25% of the people are using the pump set and rest of the people are laborers. Labor does not get any subsidy benefit. It is the landowner who gets the subsidy. He is only in a mean to till the land and have the, जिसको हम बोलते हैं अन्नदाता. अन्नदाता तो सब्सिडी लेगा ही. अगर अन्नदाता अगर सब्सिडी नहीं लेगा, तो how many of us are prepared to have wheat at 150 rupees a kg? The question is, subsidy is ultimately putting a brake on the pricing of the food chain. Only thing is that the government subsidies can't be unlimited. There is a ceiling and sky is not the limit for that ceiling. We should always say that you seal the subsidy in a measurable manner, assess it properly based on the geography, based on the monsoon fall, based on the extent of the agriculture in that, based on the crop failures, and whatever subsidy is decided, in a measured manner you pass on, everybody will live happily.
So, sir,
I think what you said is absolutely right, that it is important to provide subsidized power to farmers so that food prices do not really go up. But Dr. Singh is also right in a way that we have to free distribution companies from this burden. So one way could be that state could introduce uniform power tariffs for all these sectors and give targeted subsidies which are paid into the accounts of the parties concerned through the Aadhaar route or whatever, and depending on their economic status and the kind of crops they grow in each region.
So, two problems with what? Subsidy is not a dirty word. These are means to help people, and we do have people who need help, absolutely. Two problems. One is there is a change in cropping patterns. You distort. Why do you grow rice in a dry region? And there are numerous examples of generational shifts. Telangana region till the 70s was coarse grain was the diet, not rice. Second problem, the microeconomic signaling. If you subsidize on a kilowatt hour basis, meaning free power or nearly free power, farmer has no incentive to buy an efficient pump set. Instead, if you gave that subsidy through another means, DBT is one option people talk of. Now you say that I will give you subsidy because I don't want the costly wheat like you're saying. But you have now an incentive to get an efficient pump set and go to maybe drip irrigation or change your cropping and all of these. Then you will save enormous water, because otherwise your water tables are falling dramatically. When you're down to a 800 or 1100 feet water table, then everybody is paying for that inefficiency. So the point is not should we have subsidies. Are they effective? Are they giving microeconomic incentives to become efficient? That is the suggestion.
Can you charge industry more who is loss making? Can you charge a commercial shop even if it is incurring losses, just on the basis of he is doing a commercial business? And this power purchase cost, which is let's say 5 rupees, you can charge a commercial consumer or an industrial consumer around 9 rupees, and the domestic at a level of 3 rupees. I have no issue till the time you charge in 3 rupees or 2 rupees, but I have a serious issues if the industrial consumers have to pay for that. Because this is a big hindrance to economy as such. And most of the developed nation actually give subsidy to industrial consumer, not the residential consumer. The second point is, it has reached to a level where the industrial consumers have started going away from DISCOMs. And it is happening in Delhi. The cost of power for industrial consumer and commercial consumer is around 10 rupees. Solar cost is costing them around 7 rupees. So last 1 year, I am finding most of the industrial and commercial consumers are now started opting for solar. These guys won't go out of DISCOM. They were providing subsidy to your domestic consumers. And finally, what will happen, the DISCOM will be only serving to subsidized consumer only. This is a bad scenario.
DISCOM they are willing, they want this subsidy game. They are using this as far as this agriculture consumers, agriculture-based states, DISCOMs are using this subsidy as a black hole for manipulating these losses. So, if you are suggesting them to meter this and take these charges as per the electricity consumption, they are not ready. In fact, DISCOMs are showing multiple reasons for not metering it because they are getting easy money from the state governments. So, this is what is the basic question, whether these DISCOMs are willing to really meter these consumers and take subsidy take this subsidy from government or from the users. As you rightly said, this because actually they are not doing these changes on the ground. They are not improving. They are not improving on the ground. They are not taking any measures, but they are escalating this consumption and they are reducing the losses. This is happening particularly in these 8 to 10 states where there is a huge agriculture base. Okay. Now, as you said rightly, yes, the ST consumers are leaving. They are going away from the DISCOMs and their mix is changing, and this is actually putting them in threat. Their assured revenue, which I mentioned, around 50% revenue, which was coming to them, is now going away, and they are living with only those subsidized consumers.
All the so-called advanced states in our federal system who are reporting AT&C losses less than 10 or 12 or single digit. They are getting the benefit of this unmeasured subsidy translated into a units and putting a good figure before all the monitoring agencies. Metering is a big challenge. Our friends in the DISCOM, they come out with so many problems as far as this meter installation at the consumer level is concerned. Meter has been a source of concern for all of us because it is the only instrument which says that how much I have sold. And it is the most neglected part of our entire activities. Our failure rating in the meter is much more than what we have seen with our conductor snapping or transformer failures or your plant outages, or if you say that the distribution at the substation interventions. We have to have a efficient metering at the agriculture end. Here we can use the IT applications and have a meter recording at the feeder as a basis for translating the subsidy into cash. You need not go to each agriculturist for taking a record of his consumption. If all the agriculture feeders are metered in an efficient manner and that input and outgoing at that feeder is measured, then I believe that it will be in a win-win situation for all the stakeholders of this sector. That is, the agriculturists will know how much the government is paying them. It will be a mileage for the political visionaries, and no subsidy will be misused, and at the same time DISCOMs will be stressed to improve their inefficient working levels, that is the other losses which they are not focusing at all. In the beginning of the discussion, my friend has segregated AT&C losses in the LT and ST sector separately. High tension consumers losses are roughly around the 4 to 5% range, and when you extend your LT networking, then the losses go abnormally high. Because money is not given to them, they are not in a position to address the issue of replacing the conductors within an appropriate size. And here starts the difficulties for the DISCOMs and their manipulation practices. when they find that they are not in a position to meet out their AT&C losses targets because of failures of reconductoring, failures of the transformer outages, then they switch over to manipulating their figures by easy available mechanism, that is translating the subsidy into the electrical sold. So we have to segregate the subsidy business into a very measured and very re-verifiable. So don't eye for metering all the agriculture pump connections. I think it will be a huge challenge and nobody will meet out. I may say on paper that I will meter all the agriculture connections, because in case of my DISCOM, they have gone to the regulator and put in an oath that all my meter connections are metered. The question is, nobody is revisiting that oath by simply saying that my meters are now no more working, so my consumers are not metered now. Neither the DISCOM has the courage, nor the regulator is having, because they are very sensitive. They have issued letters that until unless you give this oath, I am going to penalize you. So that is some sort of an extortion which they got that oath. Now, to come out of this is simple way, all agriculture pump connection feeders should be metered, they should be monitored online, have the consumption. There may be an error. I agree that there will be an error in the system of assessment of subsidy, but to great extent, our manipulation of AT&C losses will be wiped out.
What if we give the subsidy based on the actual consumption? If we meter them and if we transfer directly subsidy to based on their meter readings, then I guess the whole problem will get solved.
In case of our state, it is a per unit based subsidy.
Per unit based?
Yes, 7,500 for 5 HP and for 3 HP it is 6,000. So we are very near to a measured subsidy, but at the field level, depending upon the, we may say that is a judgment error. If somebody is using less, he is getting that limit, but nobody is crossing that limit.
Correct. So, sir, similar to that, it means at national level, if we, like LPG, the consumer pays the full amount to the government, and then subsidized amount gets credited to their account. If we meter all these agriculture consumers, as per the consumption, if the subsidy amount directly gets credited to their account, then I think the measurement as well as the subsidy, the both intentions will get solved.
See, it is a good suggestion to have a direct benefit transfer. But by habit in our society, we will be willing to pay to a pawn shop owner, we will be willing to pay our tailor, but when it comes to the payment of the electricity bill to a DISCOM, one time or other, every person says that my bill is too much. We are not willing to pay our electricity bill in a disciplined manner as we pay other charges in our life cycle. The reason is very simple. Telephone is disconnected by the exchange, mobile is stopped from your tower, but DISCOMs are not equipped with that authority to disconnect your connection. So until unless we become disciplined to pay the DISCOMs bill timely, and defaults are more in urban areas than in the rural areas, we may say that this agriculturist is using his pump 24 hours because he is not asked to pay. But similarly is the story in urban areas also. We also default, the ST consumers also default, but we lost track about them because we are fear to have a talk about them.
I'd also like to touch upon privatization and franchising topic. State government running their power distribution business, privatization of DISCOM and appointing some electricity franchisee has shown mixed results. Somewhere privatization failed, but somewhere it succeeded. At the same time, some state government DISCOMs showed a drastic improvement. So in present scenario, how do you see the private sector participation in power distribution segment?
Private sector, as far as this efficiency improvement and the performance change management, it is definitely required. In the beginning, if you see the very first distribution franchisee, which was Bhiwandi, okay, there were no minimum benchmark which was available, and the kind of investment which was sought in that tender document was very minimal. So they had got very good opportunity to stabilize themselves and put some investment and improve and take returns on them. However, subsequently, all distribution, means the tender document got that minimum rate to be quoted year on year. So that stream was given, and which actually made this game difficult for the distribution franchises, because the bidders had not to put their quote lesser than which was given. So there was a pressure which was created. They did best from their side. Okay, they put best efforts, they put investment, they brought good people on board, but ultimately, if you are not able to survive more than 2 or 3 years, then you will have to shut down the business, and that's what actually happened in distribution franchise game. Yes, as you said, few discoms are doing better. Those discoms who have implemented the IT system effectively, I guess the decision making system and the monitoring system, the discoms who have implemented these two parts, the one thing is monitoring, and then accordingly which helps you for decision making, they have come up good and they have improved a lot. So as far as government is concerned, so ultimately what we are looking ahead is the government will come with some different model, like the one which is in management operator kind of thing, where you will not, means the private people who are coming as a expert or skilled people, they will not have to put this capex, capital expenditure, in first few years, and there where then the balance will be striked out.
So, do you think that it is going to be a success? Because in case of franchises, like you said, that they made it difficult for them, and then they made an exit.
So the one change which I mentioned is about the removing of this capex, because that was creating pressure on their returns, because they were initially putting 200, 300 crores. See, the one deviation or discrimination between of government is ultimately who is end beneficiary? The consumer is a end beneficiary. So when one area is given to distribution franchisee for performance improvement, the investment which was coming on account of this IPDS or RPDRP, which was not allowed in that area. So that was a gap over there. So now that has been that is being addressed, and because that was a risk. The initial investment was a risk. So now government is allowing this RPDRP or any IPDS kind of fund in that area. So now the only part is the skill and that ability. Okay. So as far as this change, ultimately everybody knows. See, all government employees, distribution employees particularly, they are working day and night on the ground. So they know their job very well. Only thing is that change management. Okay. So right now the Uday has given the direction. They have given the direction. They have now taken commitment. So only change is that change management. So now for that, bringing that change, you will have to depute some private agencies in form of, or some other form, management operator, or you take any name, give any name to that. But these people will come, these people will help, they will bring the changes in first 1 or 2 years, they will involve the people of the DISCOM, and gradually they will be backed out. So this is what is model which is being discussed at national level, and hope this private efficiency and private skill will help in improving the loss.
After the Uday, now next 2 years are actually the DISCOMs have to do a lot of self-introspection and see what their strengths are and how they have to come out of this AT&C loss figure of 25%. There are different models. I won't say this model is good or that model is good. Rajasthan has recently gone for distribution franchisee model. Some of the distribution franchisee model in Maharashtra has been extremely successful, few are failure also. If you see Delhi model of PPP, Delhi government has been immensely benefited in there. They were providing some 1200 crore subsidy in 2002. For next 10 years, they didn't provide any subsidy. There has been no funding from the government side. The DISCOMs were left to do business of their own. Huge improvement in the loss level, which helped them to sustain also. So that again is a model where both the government is getting full benefit, customer is also getting the full benefit in terms of reliability. CESU is now becoming privatized. So Odisha government has decided that the PPP model is a better. MP government is coming out with some different model. They are going for the commercial outsourcing of their entire process, right from They are hiring agency who will install meter, read, billing, everything. All commercial will be outsourced because they find that commercially they are not able to manage things well. So the revenue outsourcing business is there. If you think that you can bring that, do it. If you think you cannot bring it, then it is better you go for a different model. I strongly advocate that the job of government is to govern, not to do business, not to run business. That should be left to the professionals. And it's the regulation, it's the governance which should be in the hand of government, and that is how the sector can flourish.
I would like to add some word to it. The whole of the problem starts with an old English proverb which says that don't allow a stranger to your bedroom. The business of this franchisee outletting and trying with various experiments have been downloaded on us from the policymakers. Nobody has discussed the DISCOM officials what suits them. If you fine-tune the operations of the DISCOM, then they can be very well segregated into one is the operation and maintenance, and second is the billing and revenue collection. DISCOMs have to come out of their old stigma that this business has to be opened for the competition. Until unless you bring in the competition, your indices of the performance are not going to be tested by the consumer. Until unless that parameters of the competitions are there, consumers are not going to be benefited. Ultimately, the objective of the whole of this exercise, whether you talk about the Electricity Act, whether you talk about the supply and carriage business, whether you talk about the PLF, whether you talk about the transmission efficiency, all are joining here to have the cheapest power supply to the consumer. If our objective is fixed, that I want to serve my consumers in a most cheapest power, then why there should be a conflict of why I should hand over this to the franchisee or why I should not have this model or that model. When the house is occupied by all the family members, nobody talks about renting a part of it. But one by one, when the family member leaves for some reason or other, the house owner starts exploring the idea of renting the floor so that he can have a social security at one place and a small source of additional income to support his life. So franchisees are always welcome. Only idea is how to select them, what should be the level playing field for a newcomer, and what I am going to earn out of him. If you address these three requirements, then I think that the franchisee model will be an all success model and the consumer will be benefited ultimately because inefficiency will be thrown out by the efficiency. Thank you.
If we talk of rural franchising, in rural areas, APEDCL also introduced rural feeder franchising and handed over the maintenance to locals. Revenue collection improved and also service quality. But very few states have introduced such kind of models. Few states started but failed. So what could be the reason?
It is implemented across all states. The name is different. Somewhere it is rural franchisee, somewhere it is feeder manager, or somewhere that responsibility is given to the employee of the DISCOM itself. So it is implemented. Now the DISCOMs are prioritizing the high loss feeders. The rural franchisee was also given to the high loss feeders were given as for improvement. Same way it is being done through the employees in other states also.
Well, if we talk of some best practices also, then adoption of best practices such as using star-rated transformers, shifting to high-tension voltage system, use of capacitors in substations has helped the EPDCL bring down its transmission and distribution losses from 14.04% in 2005-06 to 6.88% in 2014-15. It's a successful model and an example for other DISCOMs. But not many state DISCOMs are implementing such practices.
I think my view is I was mentioning in the beginning. Today what is happening is the kind of schemes which are being declared by the central government are being accepted as it is. they are not thinking whether this scheme is to be modified or customized for my needs. If you take example of AP, Andhra Pradesh, the technical, of course, the losses are in single digit, but they have implemented, or if you know, the LT to HT ratio is almost, they have higher HT and lower LT. Even the agriculture connections over there are being fed through HVDS system, whereas in many states they are simply building on the lines. They are constructing the lines, which are actually the opportunity for the theft. So I guess the strategic initiative is why we are investing, where we are investing, and what will be the design of that scheme. That is, if you think in the beginning itself and customize it as per your need, then you can achieve that.
Alright, we'll also touch upon uniform electricity rates across the country. One nation, one power. Ministry of Power eyes uniform power rates. How the social and financial objectives in electricity pricing could be achieved by uniform electricity rates across the country?
There was severe congestion for import to southern region. Within S1 and S2 there was huge congestion. So S2 was the region where nothing was flowing 6 months back. So last 6-8 months lot of line got commissioned, and we have seen virtually S1, S2 is not a problem now. Southern region is a problem, but that too rates have come down from average 6 rupees to 2.5 rupees now. So most of the time we have seen that southern rates are less than northern region rates. So congestion for northern region is now more than southern region. Plus one more thing has happened, a lot of capacity has come in southern region. So that has further added, so requirement of import has actually come down. More commissioning of the lines, and we see that in October one more major link between WR and NR is going to get commissioned, which will bring in another 2000 megawatts. We are hopeful that by year end or probably by next year, situation will further improve. If I go by numbers, then in 3 years back, for power exchanges, 15% of the total volume was rejected because of this condition. So that figure has come down from 15% to 6% in the last year. This year we are hopeful it will go below 5%. So a lot of improvement is there, but yes, few more lines are required for that one grid, one price to actually happen.
The first observation is, of course, this is only a small fraction of the power flowing in the country. So you can't say that everyone pays the same for procurement. So that's obvious. I mean, no one's making the claim either. The more important question is, even though we've got a synchronous national grid now, transmission bottlenecks have been reduced. These are only based on a static or current slice. Now, if we talk of high RE growth, which is concentrated, just as one example, the grid in theory can flow quantums anywhere to anywhere. In theory up to a point. But no grid is actually designed that infinite flow to any place on demand. And so we don't have the concept of proper balancing regions as well, where every area tries to stay in equilibrium, and then you minimize the tie lines between these. Because you can make power from Tamil Nadu wind go to Delhi consumer, but it's going to be at a very big cost. So the question is not can we do something, but should we be doing something? And we need better planning, modeling of growth, because if we just take these silo numbers of growth of demand, all assumption driven, are we feeding back what is actually happening, ground reality? So for example, we've given out these light bulbs, DELP, LED light bulbs. How much do we expect that to impact the evening peak? How much do we expect efficient pump sets to help? Now ceiling fans is the next thing. We need to be much more dynamic and learning, because the problem is railway lines. If you say coal is not just coal, but now you need railway lines to transport the coal. Those have a 10-15 year lifespan before you can get them.
I'd also like to take
One comment on your first point. You said this is a fraction of power in the total thing, but this is also last in the queue. When I'm saying this is getting cleared, it means all the long term, all the short term, all the medium, everything is getting cleared. When this day ahead power is flowing inter-regionally without any restriction, it means for that particular day there was no restriction at all, because all other is already done.
The question is, why you need at all?
Are we poor in mathematics that we cannot deal with the different rates of power for different regions? When you talk about a uniform power for all, that means somebody who has to pay less is paying more, and who has to pay more he is paying less. Ultimately, our end is the consumer should get benefited. So if I am generating a cheap power at Chhattisgarh, why I should pay in a uniform power more? In a closed basket, in a very narrow boundary of the Chhattisgarh, my aim is to put the cheapest power to my consumer. When you ask me to have a uniform power, which will be definitely be more than what my cost of power is, then I am at a disadvantage. So the uniform pricing of power, why, and it is addressed to whom, until unless we get a detail on this, it will be very difficult to have any talk about its usefulness.
This initiative was taken in Mumbai, and the regulator was asked to explore this possibility if they can match these tariffs across this Mumbai. The report was negative; it was not possible. Second, I guess in this economic survey, it was declared by government. I'm not sure, but as a part of that Make in India drive for industrial consumers, they had decided. But as you rightly said, sir, if my generation mix is different, my fuel mix is different, it is not that easy down the line. We should simplify the tariff structure. Today we have in MSCB we have 11 categories and 33 slabs. And in case of LT we have around 11 categories and around 50 odd stages, so slabs. So that is what is actually creating more complex nature. Even for the smart metering kind of thing, I had done one smart metering project wherein the China meter was designed to send 1 kWh unit at 24 hours, and it was sending on the server and bus, that's what. Whereas in case of Indian meters, we wanted that cumulativity first, then required multiple signals to be sent, so that complexity is now increasing much. So we should rather, instead of same tariff, we should go with 1 or 2 or maximum 3 slabs of tariff. That's
one more thing to add on this issue. From the older 1948 Act to 2003, we travelled for fighting for a regulator in the business. If you talk about the uniform pricing, then what will be the role of regulator then? Regulator is there to see the transparency and to see that all the rules of the game are implemented in a proper manner for achieving the ultimate objective, that is serving the consumer at the cheapest power. So when we talk about this, then there is a conflict of interest between the regulator, consumer and the user himself. So I think that it is too immature to talk about the one pricing for power for all when we are having different set of consumers, different set of consumer tariff. So I think that it is too premature to talk about this.